Hey guys, we are live coming to you from Virginia, taking your heating and air questions live. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And it looks like we've got a few other pros on here with us tonight. So, hello to everybody out there. Again, if you have any heating and air questions, feel free to drop those in the chat and we will do our best to get to those. But before we get started tonight, I thought I would start out tonight's show by going over a story coming out of, I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, Kenilworth. Maybe some of you guys know. I'm probably sounding like an outside tourist. We always know when people aren't from Virginia because they'll say things and we'll be like, "You're not from around here, huh?" But anyway, so this story's coming out of Kenilworth, New Jersey. And I don't know this company, good or bad, but it looks like they did something good here. And I figured we'd start tonight's show with this story. So this article is called "HVAC Contractor Supports Organ Donation Nonprofit." And this company is called Meyer and Depew Company, a community-based HVAC company serving central and northern New Jersey for 70 years. Recently presented the Sharing Network Foundation with a check for $29,400. The foundation supports the work of the New Jersey Sharing Network, a nonprofit committed to saving lives through organ and tissue donation and transplantation. So pretty cool, pretty good calls. I don't know. I'm sure this article probably goes into it more on, the raising of the funds and all that good stuff. I am still shaking that cold. I mean, it's like I told somebody about that last week about how I've just had a hard time shaking a cold, and they were telling me that the pollen has been really high or something like that. And so maybe that's why, because I do get allergies from time to time and I have to take Allegra. But anyway, looks like we've got some veterans, some folks that join us from time to time. Hey to Gary, we missed you last week. LED Handyman Service out of Southern California, welcome to the show. Steve from Everything HVAC, good to see you. Emery, another one of our regulars, good to see you. And of course, Bob, good to see you. Mark, and making sure I say hello to everybody. Ryan, another one of our regulars, good to see you. Sean starts out tonight. Let me start with a fun one. Bosch IDS 2 or Train 19 SEER side discharge, what's better and why? Well, I'll say this, and I don't particularly push either one of these brands. However, when Bosch first came out, this was before we were a Daikin dealer. And when Bosch first started producing their heat pumps, the 1.0 18 SEER line, I honestly put one in my house. And I've been happy with it overall. But since then, when they first came out, it was a new cool technology. They were able to offer inverters to folks without having communicating technology. So you could purchase a normal thermostat. And, I put one in my house and, again, I've been overall happy with it. I will say a couple things about Bosch. The first thing is, years ago when they first came out, they were really price competitive. Like you could get an inverter system, non-communicating, but still an inverter system, and up to 18 SEER. Of course, later they came out with the 2.0 up to 20 SEER. And, they were really price competitive. That was the main reason I put it in my house. I got an inverter system, 18 SEER, for the same price as a lot of single stage 14 SEER systems out there. And since then, and we could talk about why, whether it's political or other reasons, but regardless of what the reason is, since then, being that they are imported from overseas, they have gone up in price. And so they're not as price competitive. At least I don't feel they are. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel they're as price competitive as they once were. And so that's why you see folks starting to compare them to a 19 SEER train, for example. And so, I think that that's one thing to consider. I also have noticed, honestly, both brands seem to have had troubles since COVID, and even since COVID is kind of, I don't want to say COVID's over, but it's definitely not, we're not in the thick of it as much as we once were. And even since the beginning of, or the prime, the thick of COVID, even since then, even now, they both, Bosch and Trane, both seem, at least from what I'm seeing, to have trouble with their parts, getting some of their parts and getting them in a reasonable time in comparison to some of the other brands. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We ordered a motor from Bosch last, I believe it was September, and we did not get it until December. And hopefully you guys can see me. My computer's notifying me that my internet connection is bad. So hopefully it's going well enough, hopefully. But so that we had to wait several months for that. And then Trane, more recently, we needed a drain pan for a air handler that had cracked. The drain pan had cracked, and we ordered a drain pan for it and waited, I believe it was, we waited almost 6 months for a drain pan. And so, that was way longer than I would have thought we would have had to wait, especially from one of the big three, the big three here in America. And I would say the big three, at least right now, seem to be Carrier, Trane, and Daikin. And some of their subsidiary brands. But, I would say those are the big three. Some people like to try to throw Lennox in there. I think that's reaching a little bit. So anyway, hey to Carl. Steve says, we can tell by the way you say Louisville. Oh, yeah. So Louisville, I think is how you guys say it, you locals. I say Louisville. Or maybe I'll really get you to cringe, Steve. I'll call it Louisville. Oh, man. Who is this guy? Emery says, hey, I watched your Lennox video and was wondering which HVAC manufacturer has the best warranty. I did a whole tournament. I did a series of videos, a tournament of who has the best video out there. The best warranty out there. And we narrowed it down, and we basically got to the final round, and I think we narrowed it down to, we had, I believe York had some sort of labor warranty that no one else had, and they had some lifetime warranties on a few things. And then Daikin had their 12-year warranty on some of their products. They had a 12-year unit replacement warranty on some of their products. And then, of course, Daikin makes Amana, and Amana also has a lifetime warranty on some of their products. So we ended up giving that crown, if you will, to Daikin. And so Daikin, to this day, for now, they still hold that crown. So let's see. Steve says, hit that like button. I would agree with that, Steve. If anybody feels led, you feel the itch to hit that like button, I won't fight you on it. And LED says hello to Carl. Gil, welcome back. Gil says hi, everyone. And Steve says put your questions in all caps. I think that's a great idea. It'll make it to where I don't miss your questions so easily. I try to hit all the questions or comments, at least skim over them. But I do think that eventually that will probably we will get to a point where I just simply will not be able to read everything. Partly because I'm not a very fast reader, but also partly because, if this thing keeps growing and people keep putting questions out there, we might have to skim over some of the chatter. If some of you guys like to chat back and forth, which is great, but I might not be able to read over that stuff. So a good friend of mine, Steve, just texted me and said he's watching our show. So hey to Steve, and glad to have you. LED says he's on vacation. And why do you got to ruin my show tonight by telling us all you're on vacation? Now I'm jealous. And Steve says 21 Sear Carrier green speed. Steve must be a Carrier fan. Ryan says part 1 of 2. How do you feel about HVAC products not changing often like other technologies? Seems like the same products are being sold for 10 plus years. Example, Trane has been selling the XV line since 2014. I actually agree with you on that, Ryan. And I think that a lot of industry experts agree with you as well. Up until about I would say 10 years ago, at least here in America, a lot of technology, even now, even with these updated, the new government standards that went into effect this year, you still see guys that will not sell newer systems. They won't sell higher SEER stuff. You see a lot of contractors that just simply won't offer it for one reason or another. And they'll tell you why. They all have good reasons why they think that they shouldn't offer that stuff. But I think it's a really good point that there are people in our industry and brands as well. You brought up one that are still selling stuff. I think it could be argued that there are technicians in our industry or salesmen even that are selling and installing equipment with the same technologies that were back in the 80s. And, especially if you take a single stage system and you take the TXV out of it, if it has a piston in there, that's the same technologies. Might be a different refrigerant, but very, very, very same technologies. Maybe updated programming in the defrost control board. Maybe digital thermostats have that delay when the mechanical thermostats didn't. But it still could be argued that a lot of people are living in the past and, they're almost kind of being drugged down the road, maybe kicking and screaming a little bit. So that's a good point. Steve. And Ryan, to answer your question, how do I feel about it? I don't really know. I mean, everybody has an argument for why they feel the way they do and why they sell what they do. We've always tried to keep up with the changing times, offer the best, whatever the best seems to be out there. We try to offer that at our company. But, I remember when ductless units started really catching on. You had a few people that you knew here and there that had these little mini splits, but a lot of Americans still, weren't quite sure what they were. What is that thing? And so, now here we are years later, and I think it's not uncommon to see mini splits here, there, and everywhere. I was just at a restaurant the other night and kind of, peeking at the mini split. Did they do a good job installing that? So, yeah. Steve says, what other technologies are out there? I assume he's commenting on Ryan's question. I will say, a part of that is it is interesting to always see. We kind of get to see Europe. They'll offer products before we will. Before we'll have it here. And that's not just refrigerants. I think a lot of guys will say, "Well, Josh, you're just talking about refrigerants." They seem to, they'll get rid of refrigerants quicker than we will and change them. But I think technologies as well, and I think they're a little ahead of us on some things as well. So I could be wrong, but I'm not going to say that. But I think just in general, across the board, that's usually the case. Bob says Planetary Herbals makes a cough syrup called Old Indian Wild Cherry Bark Syrup. Works very well. Give it a try. Let's see. Give me 1 second there, Bob. Planetary Herbals. Planetary Herbals Wild Indian Cherry Bark Syrup. There we go. All right, Bob, I'll look that up. I just saved it. Ryan says, part 2, why such little innovation or iteration in their products? I wouldn't want to be the one buying at the end of the product cycle. X car companies make small improvements with mid-cycle refresh. Yeah. I don't have much to add, Ryan. I think you raise a good point. I do know that there are some folks from a few of the manufacturers that have been reaching out to me just a little bit, just to say, hey, we see your show from time to time, or we see that your videos, maybe they'll catch this and make see what they make of it. Um, I will say in the past 10 years, and definitely in the past 5 years, I'm seeing companies on the regular coming out with stuff. There's I don't know if it's because of competition or just cause, or maybe it's not true and it just feels that way. But I think that, over the next decade, I think you're going to see more companies move towards these side discharge units more. And when I say towards them, I mean, 10 years ago, they weren't even offered by anybody. And Mitsubishi started kind of making one that would match up with an air handler. And of course, Daikin started making some of their VRV stuff, and a couple other companies making, some of their stuff that's equivalent to that. And, here we are 10 years later, and side discharge units are kind of becoming the thing. Folks are seeing like the Daikin Fit, for example. It's smaller, it's quieter, it's an inverter system. It's still a good price point on their product in comparison. And, we're seeing more and more companies move that way. And so I think that's going to continue. And of course, inverter systems. I think a lot of folks were hoping that geothermal would become more of a thing than it is, but geothermal's pricey, and I'm not saying it's not a thing. I'm just saying not everybody can afford it, Ryan says Bosch has the IDS 2.1 now with the IDS Premium connected 20 SEER system. Yeah, they've got a very unique setup over there with the mismatching of, or I shouldn't say mismatching, but being able to switch one air handler with one outdoor unit. And it is interesting how they've kind of paved their own way, isn't it? They haven't gone down the same path as some of these other companies. Ryan says, what temperature should I set my house to during a vacation in the cooling and heating season? Should I turn it off? Any downside to just leaving it off the whole time until I return? Ryan, I don't know where you're located. I'm sure you've told me before, but I can tell you that here in Virginia, where I'm located, it can get pretty hot, and it can also get pretty cold, depending on what time of year it is. And so obviously both of those can present their own challenges. The main thing with cold, obviously, freezing pipes and things like that. And then in the summertime, we do have customers that have made the mistake of leaving their system completely off. And then they have humidity issues, especially if they have hardwood flooring. We've heard some horror stories with it buckling and things like that. But just in general, if you've got a house that is materials in the house that are just not meant to sit in a, that much heat, and then, you pair that with, I think it kind of depends on how long you leave, right? If it's a short vacation, maybe not such a big deal, but a super long vacation and completely turning that system off, it may not be the best idea. It just kind of depends on where you're located. I remember when I used to do apartment maintenance years ago, we would tell it was in a college area, and we would tell the students, if you leave for Christmas, to not turn your system off, to set the heat to, I'm wanting to say no lower than 60. Some people say 55, but I think 60 is a good safe number. You've got plumbing in some of those walls. And then we would tell them, if it was the summertime, to try to not turn the system off and not set the thermostat, leave the AC on and not set it any higher than 80. And was kind of the general rule. And they had this cute little booklet on why and all the different things that can happen. But I think in general, that's just kind of the consensus. You don't want something to happen. And, I think it's always a good idea to have, some sort of Wi-Fi connection stuff, maybe be able to check on your house, or better yet, have a neighbor check in on the house every now and then, Emery says, why isn't Ream-Rude considered the top 3? They're just not, there's probably some Ream guys that would fight me on that, but, I think you could compare their products across the board. I think they make some okay products, especially when you're talking about some of their furnaces, some of their heat pumps and things like that, but they don't really have a strong inverter setup. At least that's the reputation that a lot of guys will say. And then when it comes to the mini split stuff, anything across the board there, they've partnered with Fujitsu to try to fill in those blanks a little bit when they're, going up against some of these other companies. So that's just my feeling. But again, everybody, you like Ford, I like Chevrolet, you like chocolate, I like vanilla, whatever. Everybody has their own preferences. So there's guys out there that won't install anything else but Rheem or Rude. So I think it's a good question, but that's when it comes to the big three, I think there's something to be said for having proprietary technology. Another thing that a lot of guys look at is sales. How much do you sell? That might play a role in whether you're a part of the big three. And then I think that, your products that you're offering, when you compare it apples to apples, are we looking at a more superior product? And, sometimes, again, there are guys out there that would fight me on which ones I think are the big three, but that's kind of what I use when I look at them. Reputation might play a role in that too, right? And so anyway, I think those are the big three, but somebody else might tell you that, Rheem, York, and Lennox are the big three. I don't think there's many heating and air guys that would agree with that, that some of them might even say Nordon. I think they would be mistaken if they said Nordon was a part of the big three, but that's just, everybody has their own preference. Ryan says, if you had to guess percentage-wise, what is the percentage of units that are still running that are R22 versus 410A residential only, at least in your area? In my area, so 410A has been out a while now. Some of these carrier guys have been installing 410A since the mid to early 90s, I think, is when Carrier first started coming out with some of the 410A stuff. So it's been around a while. Do I still lay hands on R22 stuff every now and then? Of course. I believe we had one just 2 days ago that had R22 in it. But I think to answer your question, if I had to guess a percentage wise, I would definitely say less than the majority. So I'd probably say 30% are R22 right now, maybe even less than that. We're still seeing them. They're, 1 out of every 5 calls might have R22 for us. But that's, me just throwing numbers out there, and it may be different, depending on what area you're in. I'm near the coast, I'm in an area where a lot of folks will retire to, I'm in an area where a lot of folks will have a second home, kind of near the coast. So I think maybe that percentage might be different if you're in a, say, lower income area in a big city where folks might be more inclined to repair more often. They get as much life out of that system as they can. Maybe you'll see a little more R22 systems out there. I don't know. Pretty cool question though. LED says I was the first like. Wow, man. We should send out some prizes, maybe like some free Griffin Air hats. I don't even know if anybody would care to wear a Griffin Air hat, but maybe I should get some Griffin Air hats with like my big chubby face on them and then send those out. You guys thinking that you get this nice, cool flex fit, Griffin Air hat, and then you get this hat with my face on it. That'd be funny to me. So Carl says, I think some contractors are afraid to take on new technology. I think that's in general, right? Most people hate change. You change your mattress on your bed. You hate that mattress at first. I got a new recliner, like, I don't know, 3 months ago. My wife, it's a long story, but finally I was able to get another recliner put in the house. She had gotten rid of my old chair and then put these, foo-foo. They looked nice furniture, but they weren't very comfortable to sit on, in my opinion. So she finally let me get a recliner. And I hated that new recliner for a little bit, and now I'm starting to like it more, I think people just hate change in general, but I think contractors in general too, though, if you take some of these old school guys, I think they just fight it tooth and nail, not just because it's new and different, but in some cases it does cost more, and they'll start playing that game of pros and cons. But obviously none of them can argue that newer communicating inverter systems are more efficient. They can't argue that. Now, they might argue with how efficient they are and whether it makes sense mathematically, but they're not going to argue that they're quieter. There's no way anyone could argue that. They're definitely quieter. You look at we just did a video where we showed how quiet the Daikin Fit is compared to a single stage, heat pump system. And we took decibel levels. If you guys haven't seen that video, some of you guys have been like, you need to get out of your studio and go record some videos. So we've been trying to do a little bit of that. So Steve says the cottonwood this area drifted right by my outdoor unit. Mean mad faces. 3000 says, thanks as always. I have a 3-ton central system that I am having a 3.5-ton put in. I noticed that the single return under the air handler is only 475 square inches, which isn't enough for a 3-ton. And we see that every day, pal. Should I have the contractor enlarge the return to 700 square inches? Should you? Probably. Especially if they're going up in size on capacity. I think the main thing, if it's not an inverter system, is you're going to notice that it's possible that it could be louder. So when you start to restrict the airflow, especially with return grills in regards to square inches, they can start to, in some cases, whistle. You'll hear that. I'm whistling in some of y'all's ears right now. So that might be part of it, but there is something to be said for performance as well. If you start getting too much static pressure, I would say that in general, the answer to your question is yes. But I would say the second part of my second part of my answer might be have someone to do it, check the static pressures. Let's see. LED says it's hard to be on vacation and my parents are in my home today because I am having their house termites tent. LED, where are you on vacation at? He says they are 89 years old. Good for you. Your parents are still, still with us here at 89 years old. Ryan says the thing with technologies like inverters aren't new. Well, that's true. It's new to some, though. They've been fighting it so long that it is still new. Steve says, seeing a lot of VRV, VRF on commercial side. Me too. I went and stayed at a hotel recently. It was a Margaritaville, and I saw that they had some VRF, VRV type stuff in there, which was kind of cool. I was over there like a fanboy going, look at this system. Let's see. Ryan says, I'm not sure why they are afraid. I don't think they know why they're afraid. Crypto says, welcome, Crypto. I don't think I've seen your name on our show before. Heat pumps that go below negative 20 degrees. Not sure if there's a question. Maybe that is the question. Are there heat pumps? I think there are some inverter systems, especially ductless systems, that get down that low. So they're few and far between, though. You're starting to ask a lot there, but there are some that get down there. And of course, Steve pointed out there are some out there that claim they can go to negative 25. That is true. Some of them claim that. The question becomes, what's the performance like when you start getting that cold? And you better have a space. You better have your house or whatever you're trying to heat very insulated at that temperature, because the capacities, even if the systems do go that low, you start to lose capacity dramatically. You might have a system that says, it might say, it warms, it runs heat down to negative 25, but then you start looking up the specs and find out that you've got a 24,000 BTU system that at that temperature is really only producing about 6,000 BTUs of heat, so that's something to keep in mind there. Ryan says, Steve meant to say other industries, they refresh their product lines more often. Steve says, I was thinking other than inverter, I'm commercial, so we see a lot more random technology. That's definitely true. You guys see all kinds of stuff. Bob says, problem with side discharge is when two homes are 20 feet away from each other, it can affect their performance as they blow warm air into the opposite unit, causing serious problems. Yeah, I mean, you got to be mindful of that, but that's not something I would, I mean, some of these units still only require, a few feet of clearance out in front of the unit. And then we're talking inches from the from the back of the unit, from the coil. So, I would say in general, side discharge units are, very, very accommodating when it comes to clearances and so on. Steve points that out as well. Ryan says, I can't wait for more of the heat recovery technology reaches residential. I know it's more in commercial now. Very, very true. Especially on the VRV stuff. Having that technology is huge. You get one customer that, two offices, and one of them wants to have it warm, the heating, and the other one wants to have it cooling. And just having that technology is pretty awesome, really. Steve pointed out the obvious. The cost would keep it out of residential for a while. Sheldon says, I think we are experiencing higher temperatures today than before. Should we oversize the units to keep up with the higher temperature? Should you oversize the units? You should never oversize. At least where I live, you don't want to oversize the unit. If you live in a dry area, it's not as big of a deal, but you just certainly don't want to cause humidity issues, regardless of the temperatures outside, whether it's summer, winter, or somewhere in between. You should do a proper heat load calculation and size accordingly. Emery says, does Train and Carrier I think that means offer inverter systems? Yes, they do. They both have an inverter communicating system. Steve says, absolutely. R22 is still prevalent in commercial. It's still pretty prevalent in China, too. In some countries, R22 is still the way to go, So, I shouldn't say that. I actually don't know. I just regurgitating stuff I hear. So I've never been there, and I wouldn't really know. I have a friend of mine that we've done shows with, though, that is in the UK. And so we've talked about that, the fact that they're phasing out some of these refrigerants that America is just now starting to introduce to our markets. So it's a good, as I say, it is a snapshot of things to come in some cases. So I did want to say, looks like we're just after 9:00. I did want to say last week, I did not know until the show had ended that I had that music playing the entire show. I didn't know it until after the show was over, and I went back to just kind of, glance at the show and see how everything went and just see how I sounded and so on. And then I realized there's music playing in the background the whole time. I was very disappointed. So in fact, my buddy Steve, who watches our show sometimes, not Steve from Everything HVAC, but another guy, a friend of mine, he was telling me, he's like, I couldn't watch it. It was just too much music. I felt like you were, I was at an opera or something. So Ryan says, why just limit the number to the big three? I think multiple manufacturers make good products and bad ones. If your company is $1 billion company, it's big. That's a really good point. I think that's a really good point, Ryan. Instead of saying the big three, we should probably be saying the big seven, because I think there is the big seven when it comes to, I think it's seven or eight big manufacturers here in America when it comes to heating and air residential stuff. And then it's everybody else. It's the big seven. And then you've got a few companies coming in from overseas, right? Or it's the big seven. And then you've got, rinky-dink companies. I shouldn't say rinky-dink, but companies you've never heard of before, trying to break into the market. So it's a good point. Maybe I won't say the big three anymore. I don't want to offend Ryan on this big three thing. So thank you for that, Ryan. Arch says, greetings from Arizona. Good to see you, Arch. Ryan says, is there any issues with condensate from AC dripping on electrical whip and other thermostat wires seen here while the plastic around them hold up to the acidic condensate? I mean, I think that anybody, when they're installing a system, a good installer is going to be mindful of the condensate, coming out the drain and so on. Electrical whips are supposed to be rated for that, for wet locations, but it's not a bad point. Things do break down over time, and I think, as I said, any good installer is going to be mindful of where that condensate pipe comes out, where it's going to be dripping. Just because it's, a time of year that it's not going to be condensating, trying to look ahead a little bit and be mindful of that. And so if you're a homeowner and you've got a contractor installing a new system or something like that, maybe that's something you should watch too. They start installing stuff and you look at, where's this condensation going to be going? Is it going in my flower bed here? Did they plumb it out somewhere else? Does it connect to a condensing furnace and I need to worry about it freezing in the winter? So maybe we need to either cut it back or reroute it because of that. Those are all things that should be considered by the installation company, but also as the homeowner, might be a good idea for you. Computer is slowing down. Here we go. All right, there it goes. I'm having some internet issues tonight, guys. So hopefully, let's see. Let me make sure it's going to work. Okay, there it goes. I'm checking on my other computer, making sure that it is turning out okay. It looks blurry, but it looks like it's still coming through. So I apologize if the internet speeds are as bad as they appear to be. So Emery said, or let's see, Ryan. Okay, we answered that. Emery says, how do you get R22 to charge a system that's low on R22? It's a great question. I don't know if you can in some places now. I can't, I don't think I could get my hands on it right now, at least from ordering from my normal suppliers. Every now and then I'll have somebody email me or call me and say, I've got one that's been sitting in my garage and I'll sell it to you. But other than that, I think R22, we're very close to it being like R12, where maybe in the next couple years, seeing those green jugs it's going to be like, it's going to be like looking at a museum, what is that? when did they make those green ones, Emery says, Sheldon, no, you don't want an oversized unit, especially in humid environments. Very true. Charlie says, if I buy an by the way, welcome, Charlie. I don't know if I've seen your name on our show before. If I buy an AC surge protector at the same time, I buy a new furnace and an AC, will the installer put them in? Got it from Amazon. It's a good question, Charlie. Some installers will not install stuff bought from Amazon, but sometimes they will. So he said, got it from Amazon. LED says, Griffin Air, okay, but with your face, I pass. That's funny. Ryan says, do you stay busy during the shoulder seasons? In the past, did you ever have to pivot your business to doing a non-HVAC work to keep employees busy? I always hear you can get a deal during those times. Ryan, I have heard that too. I've done videos on that where companies will change their pricing based on how busy they are. We don't do that at Griffin Air. Not very much anyway. I mean, I can't say that we've never changed our prices a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I see some of these companies, they'll swing their prices thousands of dollars, certain times of the year. And it's, before anybody gets on here and comments, well, Josh, you just don't understand supply and demand. I understand what supply and demand is. I also understand that you're changing your prices, and I'm just telling your customers that you do that. So there you go. But To answer your question on if Griffin Air ever does anything outside of HVAC, the answer is yes. So we offer plumbing, and we'll usually do less of it when we're real busy in the summer and more of it when we're not so busy in the fall and winter. And then we also do crawl space encapsulations. So that's something we started offering last year. And there's a lot of companies in our area that do them incorrectly. And so there was a big need for that. And so it's something that we can stay busy at, and do it right and help a customer out. Then it's a win-win. So Arch says, Carl, how's it going up north? Watch out for the bears. Kendall, welcome to the show. Kendall follows us on Facebook more. I always see you, liking our stuff on Facebook. So we appreciate you keeping up with us over there. He says, I'm putting in the new Bosch heat pump in my house. Do you think it's worth upgrading the blower to an ECM? I have 3 zones with a bypass damper. So, Kendall, I think that if you do have zoning, then I would consider maybe going with a variable speed system. I like Bosch. I think Bosch is an okay product across, in general. But I would maybe, if you haven't already pulled the trigger, maybe consider a communicating inverter system. The zoning equipment's going to cost a little more, but the functionality and the capabilities of being able to ramp up and down based on, just one of the 3 zones calling is far superior than a non-communicating system. So just throwing that out there, maybe something to consider. Carl says that poor guy got 8x1. Arch says anyone with a Mirage inverter mini split seems that these mini splits are made in China. A couple of texts said that it's easy to find parts around here for Mirage. So Arch, I don't know much about Mirage because I think they're bigger out in your area than they are mine. But what I was told is that they're not being made in China, that they're actually being imported in from Mexico. And so, good or bad, I mean, that I was told that. Now, I don't know how accurate that is. Maybe one of the other pros on here can speak to that, but just something to consider. Maybe the parts might be more available if they're coming out of Mexico versus China. Just might be something to consider there. Carl, what a way to go. Carl says finally hit the 90s here. We are just now starting to see some upper 80s. We haven't touched 90s yet, but I think we will by the end of this week here in Virginia. Carl says, poor guy just drinking his morning coffee and gets ate by a bear. Goodness. That is, I haven't heard about that. So Charlie says, bought a Carrier AC and furnace today going in on Friday. Nice, Charlie. Let me ask you, where are you located and what company did you go with? Feel free to give them a shout out. Arch says, just enjoying the nature and relaxing, a real tragedy. Yeah, that's crazy. Arch and Carl talking about some bear attack. Let's see. Hellboy says, got a Bryant PH4Z. Can find the motherboard. Can I get pointed in the right direction? This is all new to me, looking to learn. Hellboy, have you tried? I mean, I don't know if you're a pro and you're having trouble finding this part, or if you're just a homeowner trying to find this part. But most heat and air guys should have some sort of Carrier or Bryant, because Carrier and Bryant are the same company. Should have a good supplier somewhere that you should be able to get that part that you need, or at least point you in the right direction. LED says, Riverside, California. My parents live here also. Nice. My wife and I have been to Beverly Hills and Hollywood and all that sort of stuff twice now. She's been twice. I've only been once. And it was a good time. It's not really like, I don't know that it would have been top of my list. I probably would have been like, maybe wanting to do something like go to an NFL game or something like that. But I still had a great time, going out there. Arch says, when it's hot like this, they Come down looking for water and food. Still talking about the bears. Ryan says, "Hey Josh, what did you think of the questions I sent for a tour at Daikin?" Hey Ryan, I copied those questions and added them to our master list that we have for all the questions that we're going to be trying to get asked and stuff, or for video ideas. I don't have those right in front of me, so I can't speak to them, but I can tell. I will say this: I did glance at them, and I was like, some of these are good. Let me add them to our master list. We are going to have a finite amount of time when we're there, and I do appreciate your suggestions. And if one of them works out and we end up getting it done, I hope we can. But please don't be offended if we don't. We've got, all these ideas that we want to get done while we're there, and we just don't have but so much time. We're going to get as much done as we can there, and show some of these folks kind of that behind the scenes at Daikin that a lot of homeowners never get to see. A lot of folks have never seen what a factory looks like, that, where they're making heating and air products. A lot of folks don't even think that if it says assembled in America or made in America or whatever verbiage these companies are using, a lot of them will say, well, it's just Chinese parts, and they just put some couples. I've literally had people say they just put a few screws in it just so they can say assembled in America, not realizing, that's one of the things I hope to show when we're down there is a lot of these companies making American made products or American assembled products. That's not the case. Maybe some of the control boards or motors are being, imported and things like that. But, these companies are, a lot of them are supporting American jobs. They are making an American product in some way, assembling the product, whatever verbiage I'm allowed to use. But, when you see metal come in one end of the factory and heat pumps go out the other end of the factory, that tells you something. There's literally sheets of metal being rolled out in there and stamped and shaped, and coils being made and bent and all these different things. And, that's definitely one of the things I hope to capture when we're there. The other cool thing, so for those of you that don't know, we got word that Daikin is going to have us, go behind the closed doors, if you will. They're going to have us down to Texas next month. It's actually a few weeks away, just after the 4th of July. So just a couple weeks away. We're coming up on it quick. But we're going to be touring the Daikin factory. We're going to interview some of the folks there making it happen. And I was told by one of the guys on a call we had that we will be the first outside of the company that actually films a shot, if you will, of the Daikin Fit conveyor belt line. That we're going to be the first ever. That they've had a lot of other media outlets come into the factory and do videos and do all kinds of different things. But this little chubby kid from Virginia that grew up in a trailer park is going to be the first one in the world, the nation and the world, that's going to actually get to record a video of the Daikin Fit being made on the conveyor belt line there in Texas. So that's pretty cool, So I'm excited if you can't tell. Arch says, an electrician came by and he's going to give us an estimate on installing mini breakers for connecting a couple of mini splits. Any opinions on mini breakers versus installing a sub panel? If you're talking, when you say mini breakers, if we call them, one of the things we call them is piggyback breakers. It's basically where you've got the one slot and you're able to put two skinnier breakers in that one slot. And so, let me show you. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, here we go. So if you guys see on the screen here, this is kind of what we call piggyback breakers. And basically, and this is what I wanted to show you. So if you've got a 240 volt, you see the two in the middle here have a bar, and then the two on the outside on these piggyback breakers has this, I guess you could call it some sort of a clasp or whatever you want to call that. I don't know what the verbiage is, but basically you're able to, put, if you look over here, this is two breakers that are put into one spot. And, I'm not an electrician. I'm not a master electrician. I did go to school to be an electrician originally, but, I don't want to speak to their reliability or anything like that, but I will say that we've installed them. We've had, electricians install piggyback breakers for us before, and they work just fine. You know, um, I I think that most electricians would even agree that this setup right here, with especially this one on the outside, not the two in the middle with the bar, but that one on the outside, I've seen breakers trip. So this out, let's say one of these 20s on the outside trips right here, and the other one doesn't, that the clasp not being strong enough or however it's set up there. There's been times where it didn't actually turn both off or both to the tripped position. And so if you ever get one like that and it trips like that on one of them, just be careful. It does not necessarily mean that power is off and it's tripped both. So just be mindful of that. But anyway, I assume that's what you're talking about. And, you know, um, that's, pretty common. I will say that we've seen them done a bunch of times. Bob says, I use 407C since my air handler is for R22. We replaced a condenser 6 years ago and it works great. I've personally never used 407C, but I have friends that, I think, isn't 407C the one that they call new 22 or something like that? They call it something. 407C. I'm not seeing it. But anyway, I've never personally used that as a replacement or a drop in for R22, but I've heard a lot of other guys using it. We, a lot of times, if somebody wants to go that way, we'll do the MO99 just because it's been around longer than some of the others. And I've never really had many issues with MO99. So that's usually the one we'll go with. 3000 says, do you suggest a soft start unit to a single stage unit? I assume you're talking about an inverter system, and it depends on the situation, but in general, for the most part, yes. I mean, if I'm just comparing apples to apples, the pros far outweigh the cons, especially with some of these companies like Daikin making the fit, where you can get a fit for, not much more, if not more at all. In some cases it's the same price, or it depends on the company. I don't want to go down that road, but just to go up to the fit, in some cases it's minimal, I guess, is the point, is what I'm trying to make. To go from, say, a single stage 16 seer to a fit in communicating inverter system that's super quiet, super efficient, and smaller, less clearance, better performance. I mean, we could just keep going on and on. And so if you're asking, do I suggest maybe doing a fit versus a single stage system in general, I think in general, across the board, the answer would be yes. Arch says, I bought 3 Intermatic surge protectors off Amazon for when we get the mini splits or package heat pump installed. Good idea. Surge protection is definitely a necessity these days, at least here in Virginia, no doubt. Ryan says, Charlie, offer them Gatorades first, then ask them nicely if they would install the surge protector. Sometimes asking nicely does go a long way. I'm going to take a break from our comments for a moment, and we're going to do a quick session over on, we'll usually do breakout sessions, if you will. And let me pull that up here for our live shows. Tonight's breakaway session segment, if you will, is I'm going to ask the audience. Let's see. What thermostat do you have on your current heating and air system? So what thermostat is it? If you know, what brand, what model is it, and do you like it? So do you have a Honeywell T6? Do you have a Nest Generation 3? Do you have an Ecobee? What thermostat do you currently have, And do you like your current thermostat? So feel free to drop that in the chat. What thermostat do you have, and do you like it? Let's get back to our chat here in the meantime, and we will hopefully get some responses on those. Arch says made in PRC, imported from MX company. From MX, so maybe that means Mexico. R22 in Mexico is $200 at Home Depot in Mexico. That's crazy if that's true. I don't think you'd be able to buy it and bring it over the border, at least not legally, but that is pretty cool. I'm not surprised, but that's interesting. Charlie says, I'm in Kenosha, Wisconsin Fuel Heating and Cooling. Nice. So that's the folks. If you guys didn't know, I asked Charlie a moment ago to give the company that he hired a good shout out. Charlie, if you do join us again, let us know how they do. Let us know if you were happy with their work. If you're not happy with their work, we'll just, not say anything. But if you are happy with their work, feel free to give them another shout out on a future show. Arch says they have Mirage R32 mini splits for sale. R32 versus 410. Any opinions on which to go with? Well, 410A is being phased out, Arch. If your state now has R32 and you've got a company that is starting to use it, they're comfortable with it, they're already used to working with the A2L refrigerants, I think that being that 410A is going away, I would not want to be anyone's guinea pig, not right from the get-go. But if they're starting to use them and you've got a good company that is offering them, might be a good idea to try to maybe go ahead and make the switch. There was a bear attack. That's really sad, Arch. My father did 2 tours at March AFB in Riverside, California. Ryan says, Arch, get the R32 if you can. Find someone to install it. You need special equipment rated for A2L refrigerants. That is true. Charlie says, I looked at Carrier, Brian, American Standard, got the best deal on the Carrier system. That's actually surprising. That would not be the case in my area. At least I don't think it would be. Emery says, what made you get into HVAC? Man, that's a good question. So a lot of folks don't know this about me, but I actually went to school to be an electrician. And the first few years of my adult working life, I worked at an electrical company. So for 4.5 years, I worked at a commercial heating and air company. Then I switched to another one. And then chasing jobs, I ended up at a plumbing company for a while and learned plumbing. And then I ended up at a company a year or two after that did all 3. So I kind of fell into it. A lot of guys will say that. And I fell in love with it. It was the first out of the 3 trades. It was the one that I enjoyed the most. So that's kind of how I fell into it. My first boss in heating and air, he started teaching me on steam boilers. I knew way more about boilers and how to work on them, which is pretty rare here in Virginia. If you go further north, it's not rare, but here in Virginia, it's pretty rare. And I learned how a boiler worked and how to work on those way before I even knew what a reversing valve was. I didn't even know what a heat pump was. I didn't know what a reversing valve was. So I remember learning that for the first time. A guy named Red was the guy that taught me what a reversing valve was. That's crazy that I remember that, but I do. Jonold, hopefully I'm saying your name right. I need 2 tons of cooling and 5 tons of heating. Would I be a fool to have an inverter heat pump only system, or is a hybrid system the rational option? It's a good question, Jonold. I don't know where you're located, but the fact that you're saying that you need a lot more heating, I would guess that you're somewhere up north, and I would probably defer to your local contractors on that. I think there are setups that make sense for what you're describing. Definitely, I don't think a heat pump is a horrible idea in all cases, but obviously having a heat pump that is super oversized. So if you were to size it for the heating, your cooling time of the year, you're going to have a system that's significantly oversized. So I think your local pros would probably know the market better than than I do for that. And I would defer to them. And also, depending on where you're located, availability of certain products / brands might play a role in all of that as well. So they may say, well, it's nice that some guy on YouTube told you about, a dual fuel system or this type of system, an inverter system, but we just don't have that, available typically here. Could we order it and get it in? Yes, but then you got to consider parts availability and things like that. So Carl says, does the Fit have the 12-year unit replacement warranty? Yes, it does. Arch says, talk to a tech from Green Valley Cooling, and they are now installing nothing but Daikin. He said they are proving to be reliable and have a 12-year warranty. I might consider Daikin. Yeah, that's what we did. We tried them a few times and then fell in love. So LED says, go Arizona Cardinals. God bless you guys. You guys are probably, y'all have had a rough last few years, just like I have as a Cowboys fan. Oh, did I just drop that? I'm going to probably lose a few fans. There's people dropping off the call right now because I told them that I was a Cowboys fan. When I was growing up, everybody was a Cowboys fan. Everybody I knew because they were good. And then when all the bandwagon fans went on to all the other brands, companies, teams, I stayed on. Now I could never see myself cheering for another team. I've tried. I was like, there's been a few years that I was like, this is heartbreaking. Maybe I just need to switch, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Gary, I support him in the good times and bad. It's just been a lot of bad times. Gary says, congrats, chubby fellow. We are all proud of you. Enjoy your visit to Daikin. Thanks, Gary. Arch says, too bad Daikin doesn't make a Fit to replace a package unit on a roof. Daikin does make package units, but you're right. They're not, that's not their main thing. They don't have a communicating inverter system, especially. Ryan says, Josh, no offense. I thought you asked us to send some questions. Maybe one of my questions will sneak in. Have a great tour, man. Definitely not offended. It's your interview and your time with them. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just, more than anything, I have that list of questions, and while we're there, I'm going to probably go over with, I have a lady that helps me with some of the editing, and she's going to be doing a lot of the recording, and we're going to just jam pack as much as we can into that trip. So I will say, one of your questions, I remember the whole paint question and marketing and stuff. I thought that was rather interesting. Maybe even like a quirky, maybe I'll throw it out to them in a quirky way, just see what they say. So, let's see. Ryan says, make some great content. Can't wait to watch when it's ready. Carl says, yes. Kendall says 3 Honeywell 8000s and yes. Kendall was, we were talking about that zoning issue a moment ago. Probably not going to say, or I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, so I apologize, but Nyant says he has a Nest Learning and loves it or likes it. Gil says Ecobee Generation 4. Ryan says Nest Not Learning. Nice. Mark says the Honeywell Home 800. Love it. I've got the 8000. So maybe that's the equivalent to the 800. I'm not sure. Daniel says, I hate the Nest. We're starting some the beginning of the war has started, right? Arch says an RTH 3100. You got one of the old 3000s. I remember cutting my teeth years ago in this industry with the 3000s. They were very user friendly. Daniel says, I love Ecobee. Gary says, about to order a couple of Mitsubishi MHK2 wireless remote thermostats for the split system. Nice. Let us know how you like those, Gary. Arch says, you can cross R32 and 410 into the U.S. from Mexico, according to customs agent. You probably can with those currently, but I don't think they would be very happy if they found out you were bringing in smuggling R22 over the border. Carl says, with A2L refrigerants being flammable, do you have to have a DOT warning placard on the trucks? I don't know the answer to that. Virginia has not approved A2L refrigerants yet, or at least I have not been told if they have. And so as those regulations and things like that come out here locally, I'm going to know more about it, and we're going to be able to do videos on that. So stay tuned for that. We will do videos on that, so that way you can maybe see some of those changes and such. Arch says, my grandfather was a plumbing contractor, but unfortunately he only taught me how to dig a ditch. I did get to connect a few PVC and ABS pipes. Sure wish I had learned plumbing. ABS, man, a lot of guys don't even know what that is. So that's awesome. Arch says it would saved us money. That's true. If you jumped in and did your own plumbing, you probably would save some money there. And Arch is a Redskins fan. God bless you. I think they're called the Commanders now, so certainly don't want anybody to get upset with me. But I have grown up not being a fan of Washington's team, and mostly not because of the team themselves, but I lived in that area where a lot of the folks in this area, when I stayed on as a Cowboys fan, they like to say things to you. I'm actually careful of where I'll wear my Cowboys swag out in public, because people think that it's, if you wear a team out in public, people will just look for a reason to, heckle you. So, maybe I'm too sensitive for the heckling. I don't know. Arch says, ask them if Daikin package heat pumps are different and an improvement over Goodman. I will keep that in mind, Arch. I don't know that we are going to do a lot of package unit stuff while we're there, because of the fact that they don't lean into it as much. But I will definitely keep that in mind, pal. Mark says Typo 8000. Yeah, I love the 8000. It's probably my favorite thermostat all time if I had to pick one. It'll probably change eventually, but I can do things with an 8000 that some people with a lot fancier thermostats can't even do. So anyway, Ryan says, Panthers fan here in North Carolina. I would have thought in Virginia you got Washington comes on TV in your market. Yeah, I mean, as I said, when I was growing up, everyone was a Cowboys fan. Everyone I knew, so all the kids, Cowboys, we're talking about the early 90s. So, they were winning Super Bowls and they had Emmitt Smith and everybody was a Cowboys fan. And then, as they weren't so good and people moved on, I just didn't. So anyway, some of you guys that don't like football, you're like, get on with it. Stop talking about football. Arch doesn't like the Commander's name, apparently. Emery says, I am both a Chiefs and a Cowboys fan. Nice. And Daniel is a Cowboys fan. Go Cowboys. Nice. All right. We're going to be wrapping up here shortly, guys. Feel free, if you do have any more questions, please drop those in the chat. We will try to get those answered before we wrap up here. But we wrap up each episode with the same thing, and that is, if you have a good heating and air company that is local to you, please share where they are located or what area they service and who they are. There's some good companies out there. Let's do them a favor by, giving them a shout out, and we will shout them out. Even if you've shouted them out before, let's put them in there again and give those guys some love, especially this time of year. Some of these guys are needing some love. Yeah. Some of these guys are fighting the fight. They're out in the heat and they need some love. So feel free to drop them in there, and we will give them a good shout out. Emery says, what is the purpose of a TXV valve and why are they found in newer systems? So refrigerant flow, when it gets to the evaporator, needs some sort of metering device. And essentially what it does is it restricts the refrigerant. And in the old days, they simply had an orifice that would do that, or a piston is what a lot of guys would call it. And the TXVs, when they came along, were basically an upgrade to that. They're a valve that will open and close based on the temperature of the suction line. And so you'll see this bulb that they'll have you attach to the suction line, that when I say attach, like you just lay it up against it, and a lot of guys will clamp it on there in some fashion and then insulate it real well. But it's testing that temperature and will open and close based on that temperature. And that's why on a heat pump system, when it sees hot refrigerant coming through there, that valve will open all the way. And then you'll see some sort of metering device at the outdoor unit, because, essentially the evaporator coil becomes the condensing coil, and then the condensing coil becomes the evaporator coil, because the refrigerant's running the the other way backwards, the other way. So, that's essentially what a TXV is. It opens and closes and meters that refrigerant. Rusty says DJ's HVAC, they will treat you right in Illinois. So shout out to DJ's HVAC. Showing them some love. Niant says, do you have some suggestions for a 2-ton central units for the New York, New Jersey area? They don't have many Daikin installers here. I have helped several folks in Long Island, and I have been told the same thing. Did I hear it right that you prefer single stage units over variables? You did not hear that right. I like give me a non-communicating inverter system all day long. And, we obviously are fans of Daikin, but if you don't have a good Daikin dealer in your area, I'd worry less about the brand and find a good installer. And if you want an inverter system, just find somebody that don't be anybody's guinea pig. Find somebody that's done them before. Gary giving A+ HVAC out of Westfield, Massachusetts, a shout out. So, hey to those guys, A+, you guys are doing something right because Gary has shouted you out a few times. So that is awesome. Maybe we'll do some sort of competition for this too. Some of you guys that are shouting out these great companies, maybe we'll put together something and reach out to those companies and let them know that you guys think highly of them. Gil says J&J Heating and Air, they service the Dallas and Fort Worth area. I love that area. You have some good food in your area. I've passed through there, the airport, and going to Waco once. And some of the best food of my life I ate on that trip. So LED says, I love the Nest thermostat and hate the Cowboys, but I love this show, Chubby. That is great. Ryan says, what's the better investment, insulating my attic better or moving up to R8 ducts from R6? The attic is hot, and I think it affects the air coming out of my vents as the temp delta isn't great. Ryan, I'm going to throw one at you. That is a great question, and I'm going to surprise you with my answer. I don't know where you're located. I don't know how hot your attic is, but before you make a big investment on either one of those items, have someone find a handyman or a roofer install one of those solar powered attic vents, those ones that will just suck that air out of the attic. If you got a really hot attic, I have had customers install those, and it's not even a product I sell, so it's not something that I push, to a customer. But if I got a really hot attic, I have had customers, we've recommended that to them. They've put those solar powered fans, attic fans, to pull that heat out of that attic. And some of them have had dramatic savings on their utility bills because of it. They've, you got this, this hot oven of an attic sitting on top of your top floor of your home, especially if it's not insulated well, and you're paying for that, right? Heat rises and it's, making it into your home there. So anyway, I would definitely say maybe consider that. And then other than that, I would probably have to defer to one of your local pros on answering that question. Get a couple opinions on that. Arch says 2-stage versus single-stage package heat pump. Obviously 2-stage is going to be a little more efficient, but I don't think you see the dramatic savings that you do when you go up to an inverter system, Arch. I would, I would consider it, look at the cost difference between the two, and, go with a good contractor and what they recommend in your local area. According to the laser thermometer, which isn't accurate, Ryan has maybe seen my videos where I talk about laser thermometers. I get homeowners, they'll shoot their little laser up on a register, and they'll, be trying to give me readings, and I'm like, you're not getting the actual temperature of the air, you're getting the temperature of the surface that you're shooting with the laser, and it's just not an accurate measurement. So I've had that conversation with folks before. Daniel says R&D air conditioning and heating, Southwest Texas. Nice. Shout out to R&D. Obviously, you're doing some good things there. And Southwest Texas, Southwest. So you're probably, I I've got a friend of mine that's down in the valley, I think he says. So he's like in the southern area down there. So you're probably a little far from him if you're southwest. Texas is so big. So yeah, we're gonna wrap up in just a moment, guys. Again, before I wrap up, I will say we will be back next week, same time, 8:30, and that will be actually next week. I think is the 4th of July. So no, we will not. We will not be doing a 4th of July show. I don't think any of you guys would even tune in. I think you guys should enjoy time with your families as I am. So we will not be here next week, next Tuesday. And then the week after that, we'll be on our Daikin trip. And I don't know right now if we're going to be able to do our live show. So we're definitely out for a week, and we might be out 2 weeks, depending on many moving parts. So, yeah, so I'm glad I looked because we will not be here next week. 4th of July. Happy birthday to this country, and enjoy time with your families. So worst case scenario, we will be back on the 18th, which is 3 Tuesdays from now. But I am going to try to be back on the 11th. I'm going to try to do a show while we're in Houston. I'm taking all my stuff, but there's a lot of moving parts. So I don't know if we're going to be able to make it happen, but we're going to try. We're going to try really hard. Ryan says, I'll look into the solar fan thing. What should I use to measure air temperature as a homeowner? What tool? Ryan, don't make fun of me, but I tell homeowners all the time, if you've got a meat thermometer, just a regular probe meat thermometer that you put in your prime rib to see what the temperature is, I use those. Now I have a couple tools that are a little fancier. I've got this tool that has a little fan on it, can test CFMs and things like that and the temperature, but I use my probe thermometer more than anything. I'll just stick it up in one vent, go to the return, stick it in there, and then I can test my delta T, and it works just fine. And the guy I learned under, that's how he did it, and that's what I've always hung on to. Emery says Barker's Heating and Cooling in College Station, Texas. So, hey to Barker's, you guys, showing some love to you guys. Daniel says San Antonio area, buddy. I thought San Antonio was, it just shows my ignorance. I thought San Antonio. So my buddy that I was talking about, he's a little south of San Antonio, but I thought San Antonio was more eastern. So I guess they're southwest. And it looks like I skipped over. Ryan said, Niant, check out Mikey Pipes, the pipe doctor in New York, Long Island, and Queens. Yeah, Mikey's got a channel on YouTube that is bigger than ours. So not for long. You guys need to subscribe so we can pass Mikey. But no, he's got a channel where he does a little more of out in the field type stuff. So, which is pretty cool. Gary says, good night to you and yours, Josh. Always a fun time. See you in a couple weeks. Good night, Gary. Always glad to see you. Michael says, just join the chat. What's going on here in Houston, Josh? I'm going to be touring the Daikin factory. And we were invited to kind of go behind the scenes and do some videos on some of that stuff that homeowners don't get to see very often. So we are coming to Daikin there in Houston in a couple weeks. We're going to be there the 10th through the 13th. So Ryan says, what speeds should come out of the vents? Have a great night. Well, it just depends, Ryan. Depends on your setup. So, if you have a ductulator and you have, say, a 6-inch run that says you should have around 100 CFMs coming out of that vent, well, then that, would be what you would want to see. So it just depends on the size of the vent, depends on your static pressures and so on. But, hopefully that answers your question. So, all right. Bob says, we'll see you back on the 18th. Take care. Yeah. Again, we're going to try to do it on the 11th. I'm going to try really hard to do it on the 11th, but I just don't want to tell you guys for sure. I'll just keep an eye on our Facebook or our community section on our YouTube channel, and I will let you know that day. You'll either get my cute little thing that says we're going live tonight, or you're going to get a thing that says, I'm sorry, guys, we'll see you back on the 18th. So anyway, guys, we're going to wrap up with that. Thank you for watching. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't. That obviously helps out. And we'll be back on the 11th or 18th, 8:30 Eastern. So if you're not on the East Coast, find out what that time is for you. And we'll be doing it live and taking your questions, heating and air. So thanks for everything. Make it a great week, and make it a great 2 weeks and a great holiday. And we'll see you then. Take care.